Welcome back to another episode of Give Me Some Truth. We have some very timely, exciting information this morning on Portugal and some of the changes that are happening in Europe. We have a guest that we've had before, Zeev from Fresh Portugal, to talk about these topics, and Stan is with us as well. Zeev, let's jump in. Today is April 2nd. What's happened in the last 24, 48 hours over in Portugal?
Quite a lot has happened. Hi guys, it's a pleasure to be with you again for another podcast. Yeah, it's been very interesting. You know, the 1st of April we were planning an April Fool's joke of telling everyone that Portugal now accepts English as an official language, which we have done a YouTube video. But it sort of coincided with lots of real things that are happening. So yeah, two very big pieces of news. The first one, 31st of March, it was the last day for the tax authorities to assess the NHR 2.0 system, the tax benefit scheme that replaced the famous Portugal's NHR system. It's officially called IFISI, but everyone calls it NHR 2.0, and it's a system with similar benefits but a different qualification than what the previous NHR how the previous NHR worked. And we've been sort of anticipating for a year and working for a very long time towards helping people qualify for this very generous tax benefit. And the tax authority was taking up until the very last minute, which was the 31st of March, to consider people who applied for this benefit in 2025. So starting the 1st of April, people need to file their taxes. So by law, they had to give everyone answers until the end of March. And the expectation was that when people will apply somewhere in 2025, it'll take a few days for them to be approved or not approved, but actually it took until the last day. And on the 31st of March, they've released all the decisions for people's applications for tax benefits. And at least in our case, they were all positive. So we had about 50 applications and they were all approved, which is a huge relief, really. Although we had no reason to doubt that people will receive the tax benefit because we've done everything written in the law, it's still nice to have the official confirmation that it actually works as intended and as the legislature has set it out to be. And we've created a whole system to qualify people. So we now know that the system that isn't supposed to work, but is actually working, which is very exciting. And yeah, just to explain, what is this? Sorry.
Super good news, Zeev, and congratulations for getting all of your applicants through the process. That must have been pretty nerve-wracking for some of them. Were they checking in with you guys regularly, saying, "What's going on here? Am I've invested money in Portugal. Am I going to get the tax break for this year or not?" And that must have been crazy.
We were actually expecting people to check in a lot more frequently. I think we've projected a lot more confidence then maybe we've actually had. No, I mean, we've had confidence that if we do everything that we're supposed to do, it will work as advertised. But you never 100% know until you actually see the confirmations. But no, they haven't been checking very frequently. Every once in a while, hey, any news? No, but the last deadline is the 31st of March. So let's just wait and hope that the authorities will comply with their own deadline, and they have. And it's been very positive outcome, so very exciting. Just to remind everyone what NHR 2.0 is, the idea is that if you come to Portugal and you do something, you participate in the economy in one of a number of ways that was set out by the law, then you will receive a personal benefit that exempts your foreign sourced income from tax in Portugal, which is pretty high. So it's pretty important, and it's actually a really good system. So the previous NHR was automatic. You would just come to Portugal, tick a box, and you receive this exemption on your foreign sourced income. And Portugal moved from the system of automatic exemption to a system of, well, you actually need to do something in Portugal for the Portuguese economy. And there is a list of things that qualify you. And one of them was a board member in a startup company, and another one was the director or a board member in a company that supports the national economy. And what we've basically done is we facilitated these roles for our clients. So we helped create, grow, invest in certified startup companies in Portugal, certified companies that support this, something in the national economy that's in the list. And then we helped our clients obtain these positions that will then qualify them on a personal level. So it's quite interesting. It's a personal tax benefit that depends on a particular corporate qualification. But and it's very wise, because what Portugal is missing is talent and capital. And this is a very elegant way to bring in talent and capital that do exist in Portugal. And people actually are pretty excited about doing something in Portugal and participating and doing good. They just didn't know how. And now they've received an incentive, and we've received an incentive to find a way to connect Portuguese founders of tech companies with expats that are coming to Portugal, and facilitate that activity. And now we know that it also works as it should. We always knew it would work, but now we know that it's actually working. So that's for us, it's a big win. I think it's an even bigger win for Portugal, because it guarantees that there will be an inflow of talented people that are coming to Portugal, and now not just sitting in their houses working remotely and not really integrating, but actually participating in the economy, investing in tech companies, trying to help them grow. And it's a really, really good system, almost by coincidence. I'd like to think that there was an intentional, brilliant idea of setting up a very, really good tax benefits play, but it's actually kind of happened in political push and from different parties, and it ended up with a really good system. And yeah, our clients are thrilled and very relieved as well, and we are relieved also. So that's a big win, and that's one piece of news. Then the other thing that happened was yesterday on the 1st of April. Sadly, not an April Fool's joke like ours, but Parliament's voted on the nationality reform. This has been in the news for a long time, and sort of ping-pongs from there. There has been a vote a while back with the government trying to change the rules and change the count to nationality from 5 to 10 years, and also the starting point of the count from the application for residency to the first residency card. And that it was knocked out by the Constitutional Court and went back to Parliament, and now they've essentially voted on passing a very similar law, which is really unfair to people that have already applied for residency. Many people that have applied for residency have had a lot of delays in the processing of their applications, particularly people in the 2021 to 2024 cohorts of golden visa applications. And now these delays by the government are borne by those people who had no fault in those delays. And instead of waiting 5 years from the application date, which almost all of them will achieve now, they need to wait 10 years from the residence card, and some of them have only received their residence cards recently. So mainly people with a golden visa between 2021 and 2024, which is where most of the delays occurred, their timeline to nationality has now changed dramatically and in a very unfair way. And we were hoping for a different outcome. The government was sort of ping-ponging between the left and the right until the very last minute. Eventually, they again went with a hard right. Big mistake, if you ask me. I think politically, I think they will be punished for this. But that's the outcome's not ideal. Now it goes to the president again. The president there's a new president, is a left-wing, moderate left-wing president. He can approve or not, but it looks like it's going to pass.
So let me jump in there, Zeev. Stan, what are your thoughts on what Zeev's covered to this point? I mean, what is your first blush reaction to hearing the news in terms of the legislation over the last 48 hours?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, it my first reaction. Let's break it down here. My first reaction to to them certifying the NHR 2.0,
yeah,
and so on. I mean, we did a prior podcast about that, which we can link to here, and I wrote a blog about it. And one thing that I highlighted in the blog that I thought, Zeev put very well the first time is the cultural advantages, but also the tactical advantages now that NHR has morphed into something that is much more, should we just say merit-based? They're
Sure.
looking for particular investment, particular involvement, particular skill sets, that it puts a premium on the value of having professional assistance, right? And that do it yourself may no longer be like your best course. And I analyze, and I drew the analogy to what we do as well, right? And I'm curious, I mean, obviously you don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how many people out there did their NHR 2.0 applications and sent them into the tax authority and were not as successful as your clients, Zeev. I really wonder if I mean, it's worse when you don't get the news until right before you have to file your taxes, whether or not you're getting it or not. Because I mean, the tax difference is cavernous, right? I mean, the the tax incentive is very good, and you either pay no capital gains or you pay 28% capital gains. You either get a nice flat ordinary income tax, or you get graduated Portuguese rates that very quickly go into the 40s and even 50s. So that's that's my observation on that. And on the immigration side, aside from NHR and now NHR 2.0, one of the attractions of Portugal, I always perceived from people, because I talk to people all the time that are there or are moving there or thinking about moving there, is the ease of immigration and the pathway to citizenship, right? It is a distinct advantage. I mean, you may be able to talk about tax advantages that Americans have in France. Doesn't mean a lot if you can't get a residence to live in France, right? I mean, and Portugal's always been, shall we say, an efficient and relatively easy path to Europe. They've been welcoming with their immigration policy.
Sure.
Obviously, with the flood of people coming in, I don't know if the immigration infrastructure could accommodate all of the processing of residence cards and so on. So people started to complain about how long things are taking.
Right.
Now, the news that Zeev's given about you don't actually even start the clock, not only has the time to citizenship doubled, but the clock starting when you get your card, he very accurately pointed out what a truly bigger difference this is, given how long it's taken people to get their cards over the last few years.
Zeev, what is your what's your advice today as opposed to what it would have been a month ago? You know what I mean? How has that changed?
First of all, there is a silver lining. The cards do come much quicker now. So they have done that in conjunction with improving, assigning a lot more people and a lot more significant, quadrupling the budget for processing these applications specifically. And we see now people being booked with Golden Visa being booked to biometrics within 3 months. With other types of visa, there was never really a problem. It was always processed within a reasonable pace. There have been delays with card renewals, but they're not really relevant for this. The first cards were, apart from the Golden Visa, were issued fairly quickly. But now Golden Visa applications are also processed much faster. And we don't think it's a play. We do see a general improvement in And it used to be okay, right? I mean, between 2021, before 2021, everything was processed pretty quickly. And then what happened was that first the pandemic was managed very poorly. So they kind of stopped working during the pandemic for a while. But also there's been a big influx of a lot of people to Portugal, which are entirely not the sort of people that your listeners would usually imagine. There are hardly in absolute numbers Americans or British people in Portugal. They are very insignificant within the total flow of immigration. Most of the people that came to Portugal are from well, the biggest community is Brazil, which is generally seen in Portugal as very desirable immigration. And but then there have been very hundreds of thousands of people coming mainly from Southeast Asia, and they're the reason that this legislation started in the first place. So, without going into whether it's justified or not, there is a general anti-migrant sentiment in the hard right in Portugal, which follows what happens everywhere all over the world, and it targets, what we can simply call as poor immigration. People coming to be Uber drivers, delivery people. These are big numbers, but they are processed alongside golden visa applicants and D7s and D8s and D2s. But these are the big numbers, and they have now mainly been settled, and the main route for low-skilled migration has been closed in Portugal. But because there's a big chunk of about 500,000 people that the government doesn't want here, they're just trying to make their lives harder and trying to make them leave and trying to make it difficult for them to bring their families or having their children in Portugal. But if you're mean to one demographic, you're kind of, everyone gets hurt.
Yeah.
So you can't really target a specific group in the way that they would have wanted if they could. And the outcome is that everyone who comes to Portugal is suffering. But the sentiment is very specific. But this is what's happened. So during the pandemic, a lot of people realized that Portugal is this easy gateway into Europe. But it's not the Americans or the Brits or the Canadians or the Australians that the government cares about. They don't want people to come to Portugal, to be an Uber driver for 5 years and then go to another country by becoming a Portuguese citizen. But obviously, it impacts everyone. Yeah. So this is what's happening here. And
how does it look different a year from now, Zeev? In your opinion, does it look different a year from now? How does it look different a year from now than it does today, in your opinion? I mean, I know you can't predict the future, obviously, but do you think that this has lasting effects beyond just a year from now? Or, you know what I mean? Does this stay in place for the next 5 to 10 years, in your opinion?
I think this is so. Portugal's sort of moving towards a more merit-based system, which is, generally a good thing. I don't see a big issue with the fact that they've moved from 5 to 10 years. That's kind of in line with many countries in Europe. And if the residency path is very easy, having a harder citizenship path actually does make sense. You can have there's no impact on access to permanent residency, which gives you most of what citizenship does, except for the ability to move to another European country. So if you have permanent residency in Portugal, which you can still have in 5 years, and no one has any intention to change that, then you can live in Portugal, almost the same rights. One downside, which is lines at the airport, which can be pretty horrible, but hopefully that will be resolved as well with time. But you can still come to Portugal fairly easily. The visas are still pretty easy to obtain. They're processed pretty fast. And if you want to live in Portugal, you can still live in Portugal. If you want to come to Portugal as the fast route to a European passport within 5 years, they're shutting this down. And the fact that they're shutting this down because of other demographics makes absolutely no difference. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be hard to come to Portugal for this purpose. So yeah, I mean, it's a change. I think it may, in the long term, positively impact the way that Portuguese people see foreigners in general, because the numbers will decrease, and they're already decreasing quite significantly. So with numbers decreasing, there's less problems you can blame the foreigners for. So it should have some positive impact. I think that this government will be punished for this because I know a lot of PSD, that's the center right government party. I know a lot of PSD voters that say if we wanted to vote for the far right, we would have voted for if we wanted far right policies, we would have voted for the far right. This goes too far, and maybe they will be the center left party will have better luck in the next elections, and it could shift to the other side, but nobody knows. It's generally Portugal's doing pretty well. So it recently had a budget surplus. It's very far from Russia, and it's the only country in Europe apparently that's not in the range of Iranian missiles. So it's kind of well positioned to, and it's doing pretty well. So
well, I doubt that this is going to be the last time we talk about this. It seems like this is changing quickly, and the timeliness of recording of this. I mean, we greatly appreciate your thoughts and your input on it, Zeev. It's you're thought of as an expert, and rightly so in this topic, and to be able to have this information, literally hours after it impacted is great, and we very, very much appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be speaking more about this, and Stan might even be writing more about this, as we go on here, but and might even have another iteration of this podcast. But it's probably a good spot to stop today. Thank you so much for your time, Zeev, and your insight on it. And I think the central message, and this is what we've said, our view all along, especially when dealing with moving abroad and not really understanding the intricacies of it, work with professionals that are up to speed on what's going on, because you can see how quickly this is changing. So thanks again, Zeev, for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Zeev.
We look forward to seeing you on. Thanks so much.
thank you very much.
We look forward to seeing you on another episode of Give Me Some Truth.
Wachner Condon Financial Advisors is a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The opinions expressed by the participants of this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of Wachner Condon Financial Advisors. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Thanks for listening, and for further information, please visit WachnerCondon.com.